I sat in my Mercedes across the street from the downtown Raleigh hotel, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were bone white. Through the rain-speckled windshield, I could see the warm glow of the hotel's entrance. Any minute now, they would walk out together, thinking they'd gotten away with everything. My heart thumped in my chest like a bass drum, steady and strong, fueled by months of cold determination. In the silent cocoon of my car, I took a deep breath and glanced at the thick manila envelope on the passenger seat. Inside were the weapons that would destroy 2 lives: divorce papers, financial records, legal documents, the final pieces of a revenge plan I had crafted with meticulous care. A flash of lightning lit up the night sky, and in that brief brilliance, I caught my own reflection in the rearview mirror. Hard eyes, stubbled jaw, a face that looked a few years older than it did last year. Grant Copeland, successful entrepreneur, loving father, devoted husband. That man was gone. In his place sat someone colder, someone who had been forged in betrayal's fire. I barely recognized myself, but I felt no hesitation. Everything was in place. All that remained was to strike the match and watch it all burn. Across the street, the revolving doors of the Hilton spun. I spotted my wife, Vanessa, stepping out under the awning, oblivious to the drizzle. Even from a distance, I could tell she was laughing, her arm linked with Derek's. Derek Wolf, the man who thought he could steal my wife and face no consequences, had a smug grin on his handsome face. He held an umbrella over Vanessa, every inch the chivalrous lover. Watching them together turned my stomach, but I forced myself to remain still. Anger is a luxury I couldn't afford tonight, not until the trap was sprung. I checked the digital clock on my dash, 11:58 p.m., right on schedule. I exhaled slowly, calming the adrenaline surge threatening to cloud my mind. A year ago, if someone told me I'd be here, stalking my own wife and her lover about to upend their lives, I would have thought them insane. But a lot can change in a year. I had changed. Vanessa and Derek had no idea of the storm about to hit them. They had no idea that this quiet, rainy night was the culmination of 12 months of planning and preparation on my part. As they waved down a valet for Derek's car, I reached over and picked up the heavy envelope. My fingers brushed the raised ink of my attorney's name and the embossed court seal. I had imagined this moment so many times, rehearsed exactly what I'd say when I finally delivered these documents, and the crushing blow that came with them, to my unfaithful wife and her co-conspirator. A year of lies, pain, and strategy had led me here. My heartbeat steadied into a slow, resolute rhythm. Tonight, they would finally face the consequences of what they'd done to me. They thought I was unaware, that I was just a fool in the dark. They were wrong. I was steps ahead of them now, and the final act of my plan was about to begin. I pushed open the car door and stepped out into the cool North Carolina night. Rain pattered lightly on my shoulders and rolled off the brim of my hat. I barely felt it. My focus was on the couple under the awning across the street. Vanessa had turned slightly, her face illuminated by the streetlights as she smiled at something Derek whispered. That smile, the same radiant smile she used to give me, sent a shard of pain through my chest. But it only strengthened my resolve. Clutching the envelope under my coat to keep it dry, I began crossing the street toward them. Each step felt heavy with the weight of what was to come, but also liberating. With every stride, I was leaving behind the naive, trusting husband I'd once been. I was walking toward justice, my justice. They didn't see me at first. Derek handed the valet a tip and keys for his BMW, completely unaware that the man he'd cuckolded was approaching from just a few yards away. Vanessa stood close to him, her body language intimate and familiar. The sight made my jaw tighten. I paused just at the edge of the awning's shelter, rainwater dripping off my coat. For a brief second, I simply watched them, my wife of 20 years and this traitor, laughing softly together. It struck me how comfortable they looked, how untroubled, as if their lives weren't built on lies and betrayal, as if there wouldn't be hell to pay. Not anymore, I thought. Their carefree smiles fueled the cold fire inside me. They had no inkling that life as they knew it was about to come crashing down. I stepped forward into the light. "Good evening," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the hush of rain. Vanessa's head whipped toward me, an expression of pure shock flooding her features. "Grant?" she stammered, eyes wide. Derek's smile vanished in an instant. replaced by a mask of startled confusion and a flicker of fear. He looked between Vanessa and me, trying to size up the situation. I gave them both a thin, grim smile. My heart was pounding, but my voice remained even. "Didn't expect to see me here, did you?" I said. The quiver of hurt I might have felt months ago was absent now. All I heard was the steely edge in my tone. Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came. In the decade I'd known Derek, I'd never seen the man speechless. But there he was, lips parted, face losing color as he realized what my presence might mean. I slowly withdrew the envelope from my coat and held it out. Rain drummed on the awning above as none of us spoke. They both stared at the envelope as if it were a live bomb, which, in a way, it was. My finger tapped the top of it. "This," I said quietly, "is for you both." Vanessa finally found her voice, though it trembled. "Grant, please, let's not do this here." She glanced around, noticing a doorman and a couple of hotel guests nearby who were beginning to watch our little drama. I almost laughed at her sudden concern for discretion. For months, she hadn't cared where she met her lover. But now, being caught, she wanted privacy. "Why not here?" I replied, ice in my voice. "Afraid of a little audience?" "Don't worry, I won't cause a scene. I'm just here to deliver some documents." Derek stepped slightly in front of Vanessa, as if to shield her. Always playing the protector, perhaps still believing he was the hero of some romantic escapade. "Grant," he began with a practiced, soothing tone I recognized from board meetings. "Let's be reasonable. I'm sure we can talk this out like adults." "Reasonable?" I interrupted, arching an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm perfectly reasonable. In fact, I've never been more level-headed in my life." I thrust the envelope forward. Neither reached out to take it, so I let it drop at their feet. The thick packet hit the ground with a wet thwap. Vanessa flinched. Derek glanced from it back to me, nervously licking his lips. "That," I said, pointing to the fallen envelope, "contains divorce papers, Vanessa. And a summons, Derek. You'll find you're being sued for alienation of affection and some other things your lawyer can explain to you." I savored the shock that rippled across their faces. Vanessa finally stepped forward, her hand shaking as she scooped up the envelope. "Sued? Grant, what are you talking about?" Her voice cracked on my name. Derek bristled, trying to regain some composure. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, attempting a sneer that faltered. "You can't sue me for having an affair with my wife," I finished for him, my eyes locking onto his. "In North Carolina, I assure you I can. And I am." The satisfaction of saying those words was immense. I had waited a long time to wipe that arrogance off Derek's face. He faltered, momentarily lost for a reply. Vanessa stepped closer to me, her eyes brimming with desperation now. "Grant, please. Let's go somewhere and talk, just you and me," she pleaded softly, as if there was anything left to say that I hadn't already heard through private investigators and her own lies. For a moment, just an eye blink, I saw the woman I'd loved, the Vanessa who could always lean her head on my shoulder and make my anger melt away. But I reminded myself that woman was a phantom. The real Vanessa had chosen this path with Derek, and now she would walk it to the end. I took a step back from her reach. "No, Vanessa, we're past talking. You made sure of that." I turned my gaze back to Derek, who stood there drenched now as the rain blew under the awning. "You should know, Derek. Effective immediately, Copeland Tobacco will be terminating every contract with your marketing firm. The formal notice is in that packet as well." Derek's eyes widened in panic. His company, Wolf Media, depended heavily on my business. He knew losing our account alone could ruin him. "You can't do that," he blurted, any pretense of calm gone. "We have a contract, one that includes a morals clause," I said, allowing a cold smile. "I doubt the board of my company wants to be represented by a firm whose CEO sleeps with clients' wives. I'm sure we can find a way to terminate. If not, I'll simply let everyone in our industry know exactly why we won't work with you. Good luck finding new clients after that." Derek's face flushed red. The veneer of the suave businessman was cracking to reveal the panicked opportunist underneath. He opened his mouth, perhaps to curse me or to bargain. I didn't care which. I'd heard enough from him over the last year, piped through recordings and secondhand reports. I lifted a hand to cut him off. "Don't bother," I said sharply. "My lawyer's contact is in the paperwork, if you have something to say. Save it for him." Vanessa was openly crying now, mascara starting to run. It was a pathetic scene, but I felt no pity. She reached out as if to touch my arm. "Grant, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never meant to—" "Don't," I snapped, stepping out of reach. The word came out harsher than I intended, but it stopped her cold. I lowered my voice, steadying it. "Don't say you're sorry. Not here. Not now. You'll have plenty of time to feel sorry later. I promise you that." For a heartbeat, none of us moved. Rain tapped on the umbrella above us, and the street beyond was quiet except for distant traffic. The doorman was pretending not to listen, but his eyes flicked curiously in our direction. I straightened my coat and looked between the two cheaters who had turned my life upside down. They looked like frightened children who had been caught doing something terrible, which, in truth, they had. "Goodbye, Vanessa," I said quietly. Her lower lip trembled. "You should call a taxi to get home. Derek's going to be busy dealing with that paperwork." My gaze shifted to him. "And goodbye, Derek. I doubt we'll speak again. Unless it's in court." Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and walked away, the rain immediately soaking my hair and shoulders. I felt their stunned eyes on my back. Vanessa called my name once, her voice breaking, but I didn't stop. A strange sense of calm was filling me up, displacing the anger and hurt that had driven me for so long. It was done. The trap had been sprung, and there was no escape for them now. I slid back into my car, rainwater dripping from my coat onto the leather seat. My hands were trembling slightly, with adrenaline, relief, maybe even a touch of sorrow. I wasn't sure which. Through the windshield, I saw Derek roughly grab Vanessa's arm, saying something to her with an angry grimace. She looked shell-shocked, clutching the wet envelope to her chest. Whatever fragile fantasy they'd been living was shattering under reality's weight. I allowed myself one deep breath, my first in what felt like hours. It was over. The final move had been made, and I had delivered it with all the professionalism and cold precision I'd promised myself I would. But this story, our story, didn't start tonight outside a hotel. No, it began long before, on a sunny morning over a year ago, when I was a different man and my life seemed perfect. As I put the car in drive and pulled away, my mind finally allowed those memories to pour in. The memories of how I got here. Of how my perfect life was torn apart and how I methodically put together the pieces of their ruin. The events of the past year flickered through my consciousness like scenes from a film. Happy days that gave way to suspicion, heartbreak that hardened into resolve, and the careful, secret preparations for the retribution I had just unleashed. They thought I was blind, but I saw everything. They thought I was weak, but I made myself strong. They thought they would win, but I had already won. As my car disappeared into the rainy night, I couldn't help but recall that morning when it all began. The day the facade of my marriage cracked, and I caught the first whiff of betrayal drifting into my perfect world. The good life 1 year. Earlier, I was living what many would call the American dream. At 45, I had built a thriving business from the ground up in an industry as old as the country itself. Copeland Tobacco, my pride and joy, had grown from a modest family farm in eastern North Carolina into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Our specialty cigarettes and cigarillos were on shelves nationwide. I was a self-made man, a tobacco entrepreneur with deep roots and even deeper pockets. I had a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Raleigh, complete with white wraparound porch and acres of green fields in the back. On Sunday afternoons, you could usually find me in a rocking chair out there, sipping sweet tea or bourbon, feeling the warm Carolina breeze. Life was good, better than good, really. Much of that feeling of contentment came from my family. My wife, Vanessa, had been my college sweetheart. We met at UNC Chapel Hill. I was a farm boy studying agricultural business, and she was a pretty city girl with a quick wit and an infectious laugh. By the time we graduated, I had a ring on her finger. We got married at 23, full of youthful optimism and big plans. And for a long time, those plans played out just like we'd hoped. Over the years, we had 2 beautiful children. Our daughter Emily was now 19, off at college at Duke University, following her mother's footsteps into the world of psychology. Our son Jacob, Jake to everyone, was 17 and a high school senior living at home for 1 more year while he decided which university's baseball scholarship to accept. He was a star pitcher with a bright future. They were both smart, good-hearted kids. I couldn't have been prouder of them. Vanessa had been a devoted mother and partner through all those busy years of building the business and raising kids. In the early days of our marriage, she taught elementary school, but once Emily was born, she chose to be a stay-at-home mom. I respected her choice and worked even harder to provide a comfortable life. As the company prospered, she eventually left teaching entirely. By the time the kids were older, we didn't really need the extra income, and she enjoyed volunteering, doing charity work, and managing our social calendar. Our social life was active and, to all appearances, enviable. We attended charity galas, business dinners, and country club events regularly. Vanessa thrived in those settings. She had a way of charming a crowd, whether it was joking with the governor at a fundraiser or organizing the neighborhood Christmas party. People gravitated to her warmth and energy, and I loved watching her shine. For years, I truly believed we were the perfect team. I handled the business and financial side. She added grace and social savvy to our lives. We complemented each other. I can recall an evening from not long before everything fell apart, a vivid snapshot of our perfect life. It was late spring. I had hosted a barbecue for my management team at our home to celebrate a record-breaking quarter for the company. The backyard was buzzing with laughter and the smell of hickory smoke. Vanessa flitted around in a sundress, barefoot on the grass, ensuring everyone had a drink and a plate full of food. She was in her element, entertaining effortlessly. I remember standing by the grill, tongs in hand, watching her chat with my CFO, Laura, and her husband, making them laugh at some witty remark. I felt such swell of pride and love at that moment. The business success, the beautiful home, my talented kids playing frisbee on the lawn, and Vanessa, vivacious, generous, and still as gorgeous as the day I married her. This was the culmination of years of hard work and partnership. If someone had asked me my definition of happiness right then, I would have pointed to that scene. Later that night, after the guests had left and the kids were in their rooms, I found Vanessa in the kitchen humming contentedly while loading the dishwasher. I slipped my arms around her from behind and kissed her neck. "You were amazing tonight," I murmured. "Thank you for always making these events special." She leaned back against me, smiling. "I love seeing you happy, Grant. You work so hard. You deserve nights like this." She turned in my arms and pecked my lips playfully. "We deserve them." Yes, I thought, we did. We had come a long way from the tiny apartment we started in. We'd weathered challenges, long hours at work, financial stresses in the early days, the ups and downs of raising teenagers. None of it was easy, but we faced it together. At least that's what I believed. Looking back, I realized I was perhaps too satisfied, too confident that my life was unassailable. I had achieved everything I set out to achieve, and in that contentment, I may have grown complacent about the things that truly mattered. Things like paying attention, listening closely, and noticing the small warning signs that, in hindsight, were all around me. In those golden days, if you had asked anyone who knew us, they'd say Grant and Vanessa Copeland had it all figured out. A power couple, a happy family, a success story. They'd say I was one lucky man, and I would have wholeheartedly agreed. I was blissfully unaware that beneath the polished surface of our marriage, fissures had begun to form. Tiny cracks that I hadn't noticed, but that were there nonetheless. A subtle distance in Vanessa's eyes on some days, which I misread as simple fatigue. The faint tension in her smile at a party if I spent a bit too long talking business with colleagues instead of staying by her side. The way she would sometimes sigh when she thought I wasn't listening, as if unfulfilled by something she couldn't name. These were minor, fleeting things that didn't register strongly at the time. Why would they? After 20 years together, we were comfortable, maybe even set in our ways. Some of the early spark between us had mellowed, true, but I assumed that was normal in any long marriage. We still loved each other deeply. We said so often enough, even if the passion was more routine. We seldom fought about anything significant. Life was running smoothly. But perfection is a dangerous illusion. It can blind you to the storm brewing on the horizon. I was about to learn that a man can have everything and still not realize the foundation beneath him has begun to rot. Whispers of doubt. The first hint that something was wrong came in the form of a subtle change in my wife's behavior. It was summer, just after Emily had returned to college for her sophomore year and Jake was busy with baseball tournaments. The house was quieter, with one child gone and the other often out with friends or sports, and I had expected that would give Vanessa and me more time together. Perhaps we'd rekindle some of that empty nest romance I'd heard about, like couples finding each other anew once the kids were grown. Indeed, at the start of the summer, we did make some lovely new memories. We took a weekend trip to Asheville, staying at a mountain resort spa. Vanessa seemed happy then. I remember her laughing as we hiked a trail in the Blue Ridge Mountains, teasing me about my farmer's tan, or sighing contentedly in the evenings as we sat by a fire pit under the stars. Those moments reassured me that our bond was as strong as ever. But a few weeks after that trip, something shifted. At first, it was almost imperceptible. Vanessa grew distracted. That's the best word I can find now. She would drift off during conversations or respond with generic phrases as if she hadn't really heard what I said. More than once, I found her standing in the kitchen or living room, just staring out the window with a strange look, a mix of restlessness and melancholy that I couldn't quite decipher. Each time, she would paste on a bright smile as soon as she noticed me watching, and chatter about some trivial thing to cover the moment. I began to sense an invisible distance between us. We still shared the same bed, but on some nights she edged away when I reached out to hold her. Other nights, she'd already be asleep by the time I came upstairs from reviewing the day's work emails, or at least pretending to be asleep, I later suspected. Intimacy, which had never been an issue for us, started to dwindle. I told myself it was just a phase. Maybe she was stressed or hormonal or something. She was 43, perhaps starting into perimenopause. I recalled how mood swings and such had affected some of our friends' wives around that age. It seemed plausible. When I gently asked if she was feeling okay, she always brushed it off. "I'm fine, just a little tired." Or, "It's nothing, probably just something I ate." The excuses were casual and I didn't press. I had no reason to doubt her. In hindsight, I wish I had probed a bit deeper, at least out of concern. But I was busy as well. A big new distribution deal was in the works for Copeland Tobacco, and I was putting in long hours meeting with lawyers and potential partners. We began spending more evenings apart in the house. I'd be holed up in my home office, reviewing contracts, while she was downstairs watching TV or reading. It wasn't that we were avoiding each other exactly, we just had different preoccupations. At least that's what I thought. Then came the first real red flag, though at the time I barely registered it as such. It was a Saturday in late July. I remember it clearly because that afternoon I had promised to take Vanessa shopping for a new patio set, something she'd been hinting at for weeks. But an urgent issue at one of our tobacco barns required my attention. A curing barn thermostat had malfunctioned, threatening to ruin an entire batch of premium tobacco leaves. I rushed out to the fields to handle it, assuring Vanessa I'd be back by evening to take her to dinner. It was nearly 7 p.m. when I returned home, tired and dust-streaked, but satisfied that disaster had been averted. I walked into the house expecting to find Vanessa and maybe Jake around, ready to head out for our belated dinner plan. Instead, I found the house empty, lights off except for a lamp in the foyer. A note on the kitchen counter caught my eye. "Went out with a friend for the evening. Don't worry about dinner for me. V?" I smiled at first, thinking it good that she hadn't just sat around waiting on me. Perhaps she was with one of her girlfriends. She had a close circle from the neighborhood and her volunteer committees. I was a bit disappointed we wouldn't have our date night, but I figured I deserved that for canceling our shopping trip earlier. I showered and heated up some leftovers, expecting she'd be home later that night. But midnight came and went, and she still wasn't back. I texted her, "Everything okay?" The reply was quick, "Fine, be home late, don't wait up." I remember standing at the bedroom window, peering out at the driveway intermittently as 1 a.m. passed, then 2 a.m. Worry started gnawing at me. This wasn't like her. Vanessa seldom stayed out late without me, and if she did, she always let me know where she'd be. Where on earth had she gone until 2 in the morning? Her text hadn't offered any details. At 2:30, her headlights swept across the bedroom wall as her car pulled in. I hurried downstairs, relief tempered by confusion and a budding unease. Vanessa came through the door quietly, kicking off her heels. She jumped a little when she saw me in the hallway. "Grant, you scared me," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "I was worried," I replied, trying to keep my voice light but failing. "It's really late. Where were you?" She gave a tired smile. "I told you I went out with a friend." "That late? You could have at least told me where or who. I was about to call you." Her expression tightened defensively. "I'm not a child, Grant. I didn't realize I had a curfew." Her tone took me aback. That's not what I meant," I said, raising my hands. I was concerned, that's all. It's unlike you to be out past midnight without a word. She sighed and stepped forward, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. There was a scent on her I hadn't smelled before, a hint of cigarette smoke. Odd, since she never smoked, despite being married to a tobacco man, and an unfamiliar cologne that wasn't hers or mine. It smelled masculine. I blinked, wondering if maybe some man had been smoking near her wherever she was. I'm sorry, she said more softly. We were at Shelley's house just having some wine and talking. Time got away from me. I didn't think to update you. My phone must have been on silent. She breezed past me toward the stairs. Shelley was one of her closest girlfriends, and the explanation did make some sense. I exhaled, letting the tension go. All right. I'm glad you had fun, I said, trailing her up the steps. Next time just shoot me a quick text earlier, okay? So I know you're safe. She paused on the staircase and turned, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. Okay, sure, she said curtly. Then, softening, she added, I'm really tired, hun. I'm just going to bed. With that, she disappeared into our bedroom, leaving me standing on the stairs, feeling oddly dismissed. Something about her body language. It was as if she couldn't get away from me fast enough. That night, she fell asleep, or pretended to, almost immediately, turned away on her side of the bed. I lay awake a while, staring at the ceiling, that nagging unease growing stronger. Cigarette smoke. Why had she smelled like smoke? Shelley's husband had quit smoking years ago, I recalled, and none of her girlfriends smoked either. It could have been nothing. Maybe they were at a bar at some point, though she said they stayed at Shelley's house. And the cologne? Maybe Shelley's brother or neighbor had dropped by, or one of the husbands. It wasn't necessarily meaningful. But when combined with her defensiveness and secretiveness, my mind began to conjure scenarios. I pushed them away. This was Vanessa, my wife, my partner of 2 decades. She wouldn't hide things from me, would she? We loved each other. We trusted each other. I told myself I was being ridiculous, letting paranoia creep in over coincidences. Still, a whisper of doubt had lodged itself in my heart that night, and I couldn't entirely silence it. Over the next few weeks, more little things started to pile up. Vanessa's late nights out became more frequent. Twice more, she left in the evening to hang out with the girls, and returned after 1 a.m. Each time, I'd ask casually the next day who she was with and what they did. Her answers were frustratingly vague. Oh, just Shelley and the gang. Or, we went bar hopping downtown, nothing wild. She always delivered these explanations with a breezy air and a quick change of subject. At one point, I gently remarked that she was spending a lot of time with friends I barely saw. She responded with an edge. Well, you're always busy with work, aren't you? I have to entertain myself somehow. She gave a short laugh to soften the sting, but the words hit home. It was true that I'd been working a great deal. The new distribution deal and a pending merger with a small vape company had me constantly on calls or traveling around North Carolina to meet investors. Perhaps I had neglected her needs in recent months without realizing it. Guilt pricked at me. I resolved to make more effort. I started trying to be home earlier for dinner. I asked her out on actual dates, a concert one week, a nice restaurant the next. She accepted, and we went, but something between us felt changed. At the concert, she seemed distant, checking her phone more than enjoying the music. Over dinner, conversation felt forced for the first time ever. I remember making a joke, one that normally would have had her laughing, and she just smiled politely and went back to picking at her food. It was like she was a million miles away. Then came the evening I stumbled upon something truly puzzling. I was in our bedroom looking for my laptop charging cable, which I thought I might have left in Vanessa's vanity drawer. Rifling through her drawer, I came across a small velvet pouch tucked in the back under some scarves. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a locket pendant. It was pretty, heart-shaped, with tiny diamonds. I didn't recognize it. We hadn't exchanged gifts recently aside from our anniversary months ago, and I'd given her earrings then. This necklace was new to me. I opened the locket curiously, but it was empty, no photo inside. I debated whether to mention it. If it was something she bought herself, she probably would have shown me. Maybe it was for Emily, but why hide it in her drawer? Birthdays were months away. I decided to ask casually about it later. That same night, as she got ready for bed, I said, "Oh, I meant to tell you. I saw a pretty necklace in your drawer today when I was hunting for my charger. New piece of jewelry?" Vanessa froze in the act of moisturizing her face. For a split second, her eyes widened, then she resumed her routine without turning to me. "Oh, that," she said lightly. "Just a little trinket I bought myself a while back. Haven't had a chance to wear it." She was lying. I could always tell, however subtle her cues. A slight tremor in her voice, the way she blinked twice quickly. There it was. Why would she lie about a necklace unless she hadn't bought it for herself at all? I felt a chill as an alternative explanation popped into my mind. Someone gave it to her. Perhaps a someone whose picture she couldn't very well lock inside for me to see. I immediately hated myself for the thought. It was too far-fetched, wasn't it? That's nice, I managed to say, forcing a smile. You should wear it next time we go out. She simply hummed non-committally and slid into bed, turning off her lamp. The subject was closed. That night I barely slept. My mind was assembling the puzzle pieces I'd been trying to ignore. Unusual late nights, smelling of smoke and cologne, emotional distance, a secret piece of jewelry. For the first time, the word affair drifted through my mind like a poisonous cloud. I tried to bat it away, but it was insistent. Could it be? Could she be cheating? No, I told myself. No, that was impossible. Vanessa had been faithful for 20 years. She was a good person, a good mother. She wouldn't do that to our family. She wouldn't do that to me. We'd had our troubles like any couple. Periods of less intimacy, occasional arguments about my work-life balance or her spending habits, but nothing so severe that she'd seek comfort in someone else's arms. And yet, the classic signs were lining up with unnerving precision. I realized how many of them I'd heard about from acquaintances or through cautionary tales. A sudden uptick in social outings without the spouse. Unexplained items like gifts. Secretive behavior with the phone. Emotional withdrawal. Defensiveness when questioned. The phone. I hadn't even considered that angle yet. How many times in recent months had I seen her glued to her iPhone, smiling at some text and then hastily locking the screen when I approached? Enough that it came back to me now with new significance. At the time, I assumed she was just enjoying silly group chats or social media. Now I wasn't so sure. One morning, a week or so later, I decided to test one small boundary. As we sat on the porch having coffee, Vanessa's phone buzzed on the side table. She was watering a hanging fern and didn't immediately reach for it. Glancing at the screen, I saw a text notification pop up, a name D, and the words, "Can't wait to see you tonight, XO." My stomach lurched. D, Derek, David, some friend? The message vanished as the phone screen locked again. I must have made some involuntary noise because Vanessa turned around. She saw me looking at her phone. In a flash, she set down the watering can and snatched her phone off the table. "Private message," she said breezily, but her cheeks had colored slightly. "From D?" I asked quietly. Unable to mask the tension in my voice, she shot me a sharp look, and for a moment something like panic flitted in her eyes. But then she laughed. A forced, unnatural laugh. It's from Danielle. You know, Shelley's cousin. She's coming with us tonight, that's all." Us? Tonight? I hadn't even known she was going out that night. Vanessa must have realized this because she hurriedly added, "Oh, I'm having a girls' night. I told you about it, didn't I? Shelley, me, a few others. Danielle, too, apparently." She tapped her phone screen off and set it face down on the table, then resumed watering as if nothing was amiss. I just nodded slowly. The lie was blatant, and we both knew it. Shelley's cousin wasn't named Danielle, it was Dana. And as far as I remember, Dana lived in Texas. But I didn't correct her. My heart was pounding and I felt slightly sick. That text was almost certainly from him. Whoever D was, he was meeting my wife that night and she didn't want me knowing. It was all but confirmed now in my mind. Vanessa was having an affair. I excused myself, muttering something about needing to get to the office. I don't even recall her reply. My ears were ringing. I drove to work in a haze, the revelation crashing over me again and again. She's cheating. My wife is cheating on me. Sitting in my office with the door closed, I remember pressing my palms into my eyes, as if that could block out the surge of pain and anger. My initial reaction was heartbreak, a deep, raw wound opening in my chest. Had everything we built meant so little to her? Who was this interloper that had inserted himself into our lives? 100 questions swirled. How long has this been going on? Why? Is it my fault? Who is he? Does she love him? But heartbreak was swiftly, inevitably, overcome by anger. an anger unlike any I'd felt before, cold and focused. If she truly was betraying me, then both she and her lover were making a mockery of me, of our marriage, of our family. I clenched my fists so hard my nails bit into my palms. I needed to know the truth, all of it. And if my suspicions were confirmed, I knew I couldn't just stand by and let it slide. I wanted justice. I wanted revenge. But first, I needed proof. Hard evidence, not just gut feelings and circumstantial signs. I also realized I needed to keep my cool. If I confronted her too soon, without proof, she'd likely lie or downplay everything. If I confronted her with proof, she might become vengeful or destructive. Who knew what lengths she or her lover might go to once exposed? Cheating was one thing, but people do crazy things when cornered. Try to grab money, smear reputations, maybe even harm others. I couldn't underestimate them. No, I had to be strategic. I was a businessman. I built an empire through careful planning and decisive action. I decided then and there to approach this like a business problem, albeit the most personal one of my life. Emotions would have to take a back seat to strategy. That day, instead of spiraling into despair, I devised a plan. I phoned my close friend and also the company's CFO, Laura, and asked her to meet me after work at a quiet bar near the office. I needed someone to talk to, someone rational and discreet. Laura had been with me since the early days of Copeland Tobacco, and I trusted her with my life. She was also perceptive and wouldn't shy away from telling me hard truths. We met that evening in a secluded booth. I hadn't eaten all day and could barely sip the beer I'd ordered. Laura took one look at me and skipped any pleasantries. "All right, Grant, what's going on? You look like hell." Straightforward as ever. I managed a wan smile and muttered, "Feel like hell too." In a low voice, I told her everything. The late nights, the changes in Vanessa, the necklace, the text message from Dee. Saying the words out loud made it even more real. My chest tightened as I spoke, but I kept it together. Laura listened intently, her face a mix of concern and anger. When I finished, she blew out a breath. "That's God, Grant, I'm so sorry, this is awful." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I haven't caught them outright, not yet, but in my gut I know something's very wrong. She nodded. "It certainly sounds like it. You need to confirm it, though, before doing anything rash." "Agreed. I plan to. But I need your advice." I leaned forward, lowering my voice further. "If this is true, if she's really cheating, I'm going to divorce her. And I don't intend for her to get away with it clean. She and this man, whoever he is, they're going to regret it." Laura studied me quietly. We'd been friends a long time, and I could see she was partly shocked at the venom in my tone. It wasn't like me. I was usually the affable, even-tempered type. But infidelity has a way of igniting a fire inside even the calmest of souls. "First things first," she said, putting her hand over mine on the table. "You need proof. Hire a private investigator. Don't try to track this on your own. It could get messy or you might tip them off. Get a professional to gather evidence, photos, messages, whatever they can. You'll need it not just for your peace of mind, but legally too." I had already considered that. "I know. I actually got a recommendation earlier today. Did some searching. There's a PI firm in Raleigh with good reviews in marital cases." I nearly choked on the phrase. I was really doing this, hiring someone to spy on my wife. It felt surreal and sordid, but necessary. Good. Also, start documenting anything unusual, just in case. Keep records, dates, times she's out, any expenses you notice that don't make sense. Expenses, that reminded me. Actually, there's something else. I pulled out my phone and showed Laura a copy of a recent credit card statement that I'd screenshotted. "Look at this. That's Vanessa's card. We have a joint account. See those charges?" Laura scanned it. $450 at Le Bijou Jewelry, $1,200 at the Regency Hotel, $300 at Maison de Fleur. These are in Greensboro. Did you guys travel there recently? Greensboro was a couple hours away. We hadn't been there in years. I shook my head, jaw tightening. No, we didn't. She did. Supposedly a women's wellness retreat last month. I found this today when I started combing through statements. She told me the retreat was at some spa. Maybe it was, but that charge at the Regency Hotel? That's Not a spa, it's a luxury hotel. And the jewelry store? Maison de Fleur is a fancy restaurant. Laura looked grim. She was there with him, I bet. A little getaway. My stomach clenched. That thought had occurred to me and nearly made me nauseous with betrayal. Appears so. Save all those records, Laura advised. If this blows up in court, you might use evidence of marital funds spent on an affair. Sometimes judges consider that when dividing assets. I nodded. I knew in North Carolina adultery could legally be a bar to alimony for the cheating spouse and might influence property decisions. My mind was already churning with the ramifications. If she wanted to destroy our marriage, I would ensure it was on my terms, not hers. Our conversation turned to strategy. Laura was helpful in thinking through what to do once I had proof. Given my position and wealth, we needed to minimize the fallout on the business and ensure Vanessa couldn't sabotage anything out of spite. I'd suggest quietly moving some assets around now, Laura said in a hushed tone. Nothing illegal, but maybe secure some liquid funds in an account only you control. And make sure she can't clean out any joint accounts suddenly, not that she would. But you never know. People can act unpredictably when confronted. Right, I agreed. We have a few joint checking and savings accounts. I might reduce the balances, put most money into my separate account, pay off the joint credit cards, and then maybe close them, or remove her authorized access. We discussed the importance of not letting on to Vanessa what I was doing. I'd likely need a few weeks, maybe months, of pretending everything was okay to lay the groundwork for a solid exit and revenge plan. That would be the hardest part, acting normal around her while knowing what I knew or suspected. But for the sake of my children and my goals, I would become an Oscar-worthy actor if I had to. Before we parted, Laura squeezed my shoulder. I hate that this is happening to you, but listen. Whatever you need, I'm here. I can quietly handle financial moves on the company side if needed, or line up lawyers, and Grant, just take care of yourself. This is ugly stuff. Don't forget to lean on the people who care about you. I gave her a grateful if weary smile. Thank you, Laura, for everything. I won't forget it. Driving home that night, I felt a strange calm settle over me, born of having a plan. There was pain, yes, and simmering fury, but I also felt a sense of purpose, like I was stepping into battle armed with knowledge and a strategy rather than flailing in confusion. When I got home, Vanessa was already gone for her girls' night. She hadn't even bothered to let me know she was heading out. Jake was at a friend's, so the house was silent. I walked through the rooms, our memories staring at me from every photograph on the walls. It felt as if the very air had changed. Our home was no longer a safe haven of love and trust, but a stage where betrayals had played out in secret. I wondered how many phone calls she had whispered in our bedroom when I wasn't around. How many text messages she'd giggled at on our living room couch. How many lies had been spoken under this roof. I ended up in the den, standing before our family portrait from 2 years ago. The four of us smiled back, me in a navy suit, Vanessa in a cream dress, Emily and Jake on either side. We looked so happy. I remember the day vividly. It was after Emily's high school graduation ceremony. We had a big dinner party at home, and a photographer friend snapped the picture at golden hour. It was one of the happiest days of my life. What happened to us? I murmured aloud, touching the frame. But the photo, of course, offered no answer. The only person who could answer was my wife, and she wasn't the woman I thought I knew. Not anymore. I turned away, a resolve hardening within. I would uncover the truth, every last ugly bit of it. And then I would make sure that Vanessa and her lover paid dearly for the heart they broke and the trust they shattered. Whatever love or tenderness I still felt in some corner of my soul, I locked it away for now. I had to, or I wouldn't survive the coming storm. That night, I started sleeping in the guest room under the pretense of having a cough I didn't want her to catch. It gave me the perfect excuse to put some distance between us and avoid any intimacy. Truthfully, the thought of touching her or pretending everything was fine made me ill. And importantly, I knew that in North Carolina, if I continued normal marital relations, like sleeping together, after knowing of adultery, it could be seen as condonation, essentially forgiveness of the affair, which might weaken any legal claim I had. I wasn't about to give her that advantage. Vanessa was surprised at my suggestion to sleep separately for a few days, but she didn't protest much. Perhaps she found it convenient. Perhaps she was relieved even. The deception necessary for me to keep up the charade felt bitter, but I reminded myself it was far less heinous than the deception she was practicing. In our home, we continued a facade of relative normalcy. I was cordial, even kind to her, though perhaps a bit distant, blaming work stress. She accepted that explanation easily. After all, I'd always been a hard worker. It wasn't strange if I was preoccupied. She had no idea that my distance was in fact cold calculation. I noticed she started being more cautious, likely because she suspected I might have seen that text from D. She would step out onto the porch for certain calls or quickly lower her voice if I walked into a room while she was on the phone. When I asked how her night out had been, she gave a generic, "Oh, lots of fun," without elaborating. If I pressed for details, "Where did you go? Who was there?" she'd rattle off a few familiar names and claim they just went dancing at a club or some such story. Each lie she uttered with that smooth ease both infuriated and saddened me. But I played the oblivious husband, nodding and smiling. Meanwhile, I set my plan in motion. I hired the private investigator, a seasoned former police detective named Frank Miller, who met me in a dingy little office off Capitol Boulevard. He was a no-nonsense, middle-aged man with keen eyes. I laid out my situation bluntly, holding nothing back. Frank nodded through my explanation, not surprised. He'd probably heard it all before. "I can track her, get photos of meetings, get a record of where she goes and with whom," he said. "If you have any idea who the other man is, that helps." At that point, I didn't. The D from the text was my only clue, and I didn't want to accuse anyone prematurely. I had a dark hunch, though. Among our circles was one man who fit too well, Derek Wolf. He was the owner of Wolf Media, the marketing firm we'd been contracting for a year. Attractive, charming, recently divorced, and he had definitely been friendly with my wife at events. I recalled that charity gala last spring. I'd found them laughing together at the cocktail bar. Heads a bit too close. Vanessa later gushed about Derek's PR ideas for my company, how brilliant and funny he was. At the time, I'd been pleased to see her taking interest in my business contacts. Now that memory left a foul taste. I gave Frank Derek's name as a person of interest. He said he'd discreetly check into his background and whereabouts too. We arranged that he would tail Vanessa during her outings, and also scour phone records if possible. I provided him with whatever details I could. Her frequent hangouts, the make and model of her car, her best friends' names, in case she was using them as cover. The next few weeks were agonizing as I awaited Frank's reports. Each morning I'd wake up in that lonely guest bed, wondering if today would bring the confirmation of my worst fears. Each evening I'd share a dinner table with my wife and son, making hollow small talk while my insides churned. On a couple of occasions, I caught Jake looking between us as if sensing something off. I tried to act as normal as possible for him. Then the proof arrived. And even though I expected it, it hit me like a sledgehammer. One Friday afternoon, Frank contacted me to say he had something and to meet him in his office. I left work early and went over, heart pounding. He handed me a dossier with a sympathetic nod. "You should look at these, Mr. Copeland." "I'm sorry." Inside were photographs, time-stamped. The first few showed Vanessa in an unmistakably intimate pose with none other than Derek Wolf. In one, they stood in a secluded corner of a downtown wine bar, her hand on his chest as they kissed. There it was, frozen on glossy paper, my wife's lips pressed to another man's, her body curved into his. I felt my throat burn as I swallowed hard. Another photo. Them entering the Regency Hotel in Greensboro, hand in hand, confirming the credit card charges I'd seen. Another, exiting the elevator on what appeared to be a high floor, likely heading to a room. I clenched the photos tightly, a red haze swimming at the edges of my vision. There were more. Them dining at Maison de Fleur, sitting on the same side of a booth, her head on his shoulder. Walking in a park at dusk, holding hands like lovers. Every picture drove a nail into my heart. I forced myself to look at each one carefully, committing the betrayal to memory. If there had been any last shred of doubt, it was gone. Vanessa was not only cheating, but doing so brazenly once out of town. And with Derek, as I'd suspected. The man I talked business with, toasted drinks with. Hell, I'd invited him into my home for dinner once, months before I knew. The sheer audacity of them, smiling to my face all the while. Frank cleared his throat gently. There's also some phone records. We couldn't get content of messages, but we did obtain logs showing frequent calls and texts between Mrs. Copeland and Mr. Wolf's numbers, often late at night. And GPS data on her car shows she's been to his residence and vice versa on multiple occasions when you were away. I nodded numbly, hardly able to speak. Thank you, Frank, I managed quietly. He asked if I needed anything else, but I was already standing to leave. I had what I came for. Sitting in my car in the parking lot, I finally allowed myself to break down, just for a minute. I gripped the steering wheel and let out a roar of anguish that tore from somewhere deep in my soul. Tears ran down my face, of pain, of rage, of sheer disbelief at the cruelty of it all. It was a primal thing, a wounded animal howl that filled the enclosed space until it burned out. When it was over, I was shaking but relieved in a sense. The not knowing had been its own torture. Now I knew. My marriage, as I understood it, was a lie. My wife had given herself to another man, repeatedly and willfully. The betrayal was complete. Wiping my eyes, I noticed a small smear of blood on my palm. I'd squeezed the steering wheel so hard that I'd torn some skin. I stared at the blood and, in that moment, made a silent vow. I would see this through to the bitter end. I would not be a victim, crying in a parking lot while those two laughed at what a fool I was. No, I would turn the tables. They thought they had burned me, but they had only forged something new in me, a colder, stronger version of myself that would stop at nothing to make them pay. I took several deep breaths and started the car. It was time to enact the next phase of my plan. Shattered vows and cold calculations. That evening, I carefully hid away the dossier of evidence in a secure spot at the office, not at home, where Vanessa might stumble upon it. I didn't confront her, not yet. There was much to prepare first. I felt strangely calm around her now, armed with knowledge. When I got home, she was in the kitchen chopping vegetables, acting every bit the wholesome wife. She greeted me with a peck on the cheek, as usual. I looked at her, really looked, and wondered how I ever missed the duplicity glinting beneath her surface. But she was an excellent actress. If I hadn't had proof, seeing her now humming to herself while making dinner might have made me doubt my suspicions all over again. Over dinner, Vanessa chatted about trivial matters. A new yoga class she was trying, a funny thing our neighbors said about their dog. I listened and nodded in the right places, contributing little. Jake was animatedly talking about an upcoming tournament, and I focused on him, grateful for the buffer of normalcy he provided at the table. Afterwards, Vanessa mentioned she was going to a charity committee meeting on Sunday afternoon. I knew that was likely a rendezvous with Derek. Sunday was when I usually played golf or went to the driving range, and she often skipped those outings claiming boredom. She probably figured I wouldn't notice her absence or question it. I played along, just saying, "All right, hope it goes well." Inside, though, I was already plotting. By Sunday, some of my countermeasures would be in place. In the days following the PI's revelations, I quietly set about putting my affairs in order and laying traps for my wife and her lover, financially, legally, and psychologically. First, I contacted a top-notch divorce attorney, one with a reputation for ruthlessly defending high-net-worth clients. In our initial meeting, I presented the evidence and outlined what I wanted. A swift, scorched-earth divorce where Vanessa would be left with as little as possible and absolutely no support from me going forward. North Carolina, being a somewhat traditional state, could favor the wronged spouse in cases of infidelity, and I fully intended to leverage that. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Whitaker, took notes and nodded. "Adultery can bar alimony here if we prove it, and if you're the supporting spouse, which you are," she said. "So Vanessa won't get a dime of spousal support from you. Equitable distribution of property is no fault, technically, but judges are human. A sympathetic one might quietly favor you in close calls if her behavior was egregious." "She spent marital funds on him," I pointed out, sliding over copies of credit card bills and the PI's documentation of the hotel, jewelry, dinners. "That's called marital waste, isn't it? She funneled our money into her affair. That should count against her share." Margaret pursed her lips. "It can, yes. We'll make that case strongly. Also, since you have the evidence, we have the option of filing an alienation of affection and criminal conversation suit against Mr. Wolf. I assume you want to pursue that?" "Oh, yes," I said without hesitation. "Alienation of affection. An archaic but still valid tort in our state, allowing me to sue Derek for essentially stealing my wife's love." And criminal conversation, another lawsuit for having sex with my spouse. Rarely do people actually follow through with these old laws, but some do. And huge damages have been awarded in a few cases. I wanted to hit Derek from every side. It's not about the money, I added, though I'll take that too. It's about ruining him. I want his reputation and finances in tatters by the time I'm through. Margaret almost smiled at my vehemence. Understood. We can file those suits concurrently with the divorce or right after, depending on strategy. Sometimes it's leverage for a better divorce settlement if they want to avoid the publicity. But given your mindset, you might want to follow through regardless. It could be quite the scandal. These cases often attract media if big names are involved. I considered that. Derek's firm wasn't exactly national news, but locally he had some prominence and my family name was known in our region. If a salacious lawsuit hit the papers, it would indeed humiliate them publicly. That appealed to me in principle. I did worry about my kids' and business reputation, but I knew how to manage PR. And frankly, I sensed even the bad press might lean sympathetic to me if we played it right. Betrayed husband sues wife's lover and all that. I'll think on the timing, but proceed as if we are going to do it, I affirmed. Make sure every base is covered. I want no surprises they can use against me. Margaret assured me we were on solid ground. She recommended I quietly begin separating my personal banking from Vanessa. Already done, I informed her. I had, over the past few days, moved the majority of our joint savings into an account solely in my name, leaving enough that it wouldn't be obvious to her yet, just in case. I'd also modified my will, removing the provisions that left most things to her, instead placing them in trust for the kids. The lawyer I used for that, a family attorney separate from Margaret, was discreet, and I told him frankly it was a precaution amid a likely divorce. He needed no more details. Secondly, I worked with Laura, my CFO, to fortify my company's situation. Vanessa was not an owner of Copeland Tobacco. I had founded it before marriage, though it grew during the marriage, making some of its increased value arguably marital property. Still, I had kept all shares in my name. To be safe, Margaret had suggested I not commingle any more funds or issue any new shares that could muddy ownership. We also took steps to secure sensitive information and assets. I changed passwords on financial accounts she might know about. I ensured she wasn't listed on the deeds of certain properties. She wasn't, except the house. The house was bought during marriage, so that would likely be split or sold. But I didn't care if she got half the equity there. Compared to my overall assets, that was not my main concern. My goal was more to preserve the business and liquid capital. Laura and I had some frank discussions about Derek's company, too. They were a vendor to us, as mentioned, handling our advertising and PR campaigns. I told Laura to quietly begin transitioning those duties in-house or to another firm, without tipping off Derek yet. We would drop the hammer soon enough, but I wanted contingency plans so no project would be stalled when Wolf Media was axed. She fully understood and set things in motion. Third, I decided to set a psychological trap, something personal for Vanessa. I wanted her to think perhaps she was still in control, right up until I pulled the rug out. Part of that meant not letting on that I knew, which I was doing, but I also initiated an approach that might throw her off balance when the time came. One evening, about a week after obtaining evidence, I told Vanessa I wanted to take her out to dinner, just us, on the coming Friday. She seemed pleasantly surprised. Maybe she thought I was trying to rekindle romance. "That sounds nice," she said, giving me a soft smile that not long ago would have melted my heart. Now I saw it as just another mask she wore. My plan was not genuine romance, of course. I intended this dinner to serve two purposes. Gather a bit more intel by seeing if she'd mention or cover for Derek's whereabouts, and more importantly, lull her into thinking I was clueless and even remorseful about any distance between us. I might even feign vulnerability, perhaps apologize for being so busy with work, making her feel a tad guilty. Reverse psychology. In preparation, I did something somewhat risky. I wrote an anonymous tip to Derek's ex-wife. He had divorced a year ago, as I recalled. No kids from that marriage. In the note, I hinted that Derek was in a relationship with a married woman, not naming names, and that a lawsuit might be coming his way. I figured it'd get back to him and spook him, maybe cause a fight between him and Vanessa if he became paranoid about their secrecy. That, or he'd pressure her to accelerate leaving me, which she might then attempt at a time of my choosing. not hers. I set a trap there. I prepared divorce papers to file the morning after our planned dinner, anticipating that perhaps, over dinner or soon after, she might try to come clean or even ask for a divorce herself if Derek pushed her. If she didn't, I'd still file when ready, but I wanted to cover the scenario where she thought she was making the first move. I would beat her to the punch no matter what. As it turned out, the anonymous tip did cause a bit of chaos. 2 days before our scheduled dinner, I came home to find Vanessa pacing in the living room, her face flushed. She startled when I walked in. Clearly something was on her mind. "You're home early," she said, attempting a casual tone that didn't quite land. I shrugged, hanging up my coat. "Wrapped up meetings sooner than expected. Everything all right? You look upset." She forced a laugh. "Oh, I'm fine. Just some drama in our committee I'm dealing with." I walked over and gently rubbed her shoulders. The gesture was more for appearance than affection, but she leaned into it, perhaps needing comfort. "What kind of drama?" She hesitated. "It's silly, really. One of the women said she got this strange message about me. Anonymous nonsense, probably a prank." My heart thudded. Clearly the message had reached her via gossip. I frowned. "About you? What did it say?" Her shoulders tensed under my hands. "Just accusing me of improper behavior." She spun around, looking up at me with wide eyes that held manufactured indignation. "Can you believe that? Someone suggesting I was cheating on you." She spat out a laugh, but it sounded nervous. I willed my face to remain confused and mildly annoyed, nothing more. Inside, I felt a savage satisfaction at her discomfort. "Cheating? That's ridiculous," I said firmly. "Who would say such a thing?" She shook her head. "It came through a social media DM to a friend. Totally anonymous. Probably some jerk with a grudge against me or you, trying to stir trouble." She searched my face. "Well, you don't believe any of it, do you?" I looked her in the eye, steady. "Of course not. I trust you, Vanessa." The words almost stuck in my throat, but I got them out smoothly. She exhaled and actually teared up a bit. Whether from relief or guilt, I'm not sure. She hugged me, pressing her face to my chest. "Thank you," she whispered. I was so upset that someone would try to poison our marriage like that. I stroked her hair, playing the loving, oblivious husband to the hilt. "Our marriage is stronger than some coward's rumor." The irony was palpable. We stood like that for a moment. I wondered if her heart was pounding as hard as mine. She had no idea I was the one who lit that particular fuse, and by vocally reaffirming trust, I'd made her believe I truly was ignorant. I could almost feel the tension ease out of her. She thought she'd dodged a bullet. That Friday arrived at last. I meticulously planned every detail of the evening. I had flowers delivered to her in the afternoon with a note. "Can't wait for tonight. Love, G." She preened at the attention, showing up at my office around closing time dressed in an elegant navy blue dress I'd never seen before, likely bought for a date with him, which gave me a bitter twinge, but I complimented it. We went to one of Raleigh's finest restaurants, the same place we'd celebrated our last anniversary. I arranged a private booth, ordered her favorite wine, and acted like a man trying to reconnect with his wife. In truth, this was part reconnaissance mission and part mind game. Over appetizers, I gently steered the conversation into personal territory. I expressed that I knew I'd been very busy and perhaps neglectful in recent months. I apologized if I'd made her feel lonely. As I spoke, I saw her eyes soften with what might have been regret or guilt. She reached across the table to hold my hand. "Oh, Grant, I know your work is demanding. I never blamed you. I might have been a little lost with the kids grown and all. I'm sorry if I've seemed off." She was offering a tacit admission of her behavior without stating it plainly. I squeezed her hand. "We both could have done better, I think. But we can fix things, right?" She bit her lip and nodded, a tear glistening. She looked genuinely torn. Maybe a part of her did still love me in some fashion and felt sorry for betraying me. But she said nothing about the affair. Not that I expected her to confess voluntarily just because I was being emotional. No, they had likely decided to keep it secret until they felt I was sufficiently in the dark to not screw up divorce proceedings. More likely, Derek was counseling her to gather assets or info before an open break. I probed subtly, asking about her upcoming plans, the charity she was involved in. She mentioned a weekend committee retreat in a couple of weeks, I filed that away, sure it was actually a tryst with Derek, maybe out of town. More evidence for later. We talked about the kids, about memories from early in our marriage. It was almost like two different conversations running in parallel. The spoken one, where we played a loving couple trying to rekindle, and the unspoken one where we both danced around the truth, each thinking the other didn't know. The difference was, I did know, and every tender word I uttered was laced with double meaning in my mind. For instance, at one point I said softly, "No matter what happens, I want you to be happy, Vanessa." She responded by squeezing my hand and assuring me I made her happy, she just needed to work on being more present. But in my head I was saying, I want you to be happy right now because it will hurt all the more when I crush you later. Yes, it was cruel, but cruelty was the point. This was the burn the bitch genre after all, and she had burned me first. By dessert, I could sense she felt more secure than she had in months. She likely thought the affair scare was past, that I was none the wiser. Perhaps she was reconsidering her timeline with Derek. Maybe she'd delay leaving, thinking our marriage had hope. Or maybe she was just relieved to have both husband and lover eating out of her hand. Either way, it was exactly what I wanted. Her guard was down. That night, for the first time in quite a while, she initiated intimacy. I had moved back to our bed earlier that week, saying my cough was better, and after our romantic evening, she slid into my arms and kissed me with a passion that almost felt genuine. I played my part, though every fiber of me hated touching her knowing who else had laid hands on her. But I compartmentalized. I told myself this might be the last time, and it served the facade. Afterwards, she fell asleep with her head on my chest like she used to in the old days. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, my emotions a twisted knot. Part of me mourned that those old days were truly dead, that I couldn't turn back time to before the betrayal. But a stronger part steeled itself with cold purpose. This was the final calm before the storm I would unleash. I had scheduled it all. Monday morning, I would quietly file the divorce complaint and the tort lawsuit against Derek. The summons would be served to him at his office later that day. I'd also have Vanessa served at home since I planned to take the day off to set things in motion. She would be blindsided, as I intended. There was just one more thing I needed to do before pulling the trigger. Ensure I had the kids on my side and prepared. As much as possible, I dreaded that part, but it was necessary. So, on Saturday, I asked Emily to come home for Sunday family dinner, telling her I missed her and had important things to discuss. She was a bit curious, but agreed. I asked Jake to also keep Sunday evening free. My plan was to reveal the situation to them after we ate, gently, without going into graphic detail. I didn't intend to demonize their mother outright, but I wouldn't lie either. They deserved the truth, and I needed their understanding when everything blew up, because it would get messy publicly. Sunday rolled around. That afternoon, Vanessa went off to her supposed committee meeting. I noticed her dressing a bit nicer than one might for a mere meeting. She was likely meeting Derek at some point. This was good. It kept her out of the house while I had certain private conversations. Emily arrived a bit early. I met her on the porch and gave her a big hug. She was bright and beautiful, with Vanessa's eyes and my chin. We sat outside for a while, catching up on her college classes. Eventually, her smile faded and she said, "Dad, what's going on? You sounded weird on the phone. Is everything all right?" I realized I hadn't been able to hide the strain in my voice when I invited her. My daughter knew me well. I sighed. "We'll wait for your brother to get home and then we need to talk as a family." Her face creased with worry. "You're scaring me. Is someone sick?" "No, no one's sick," I assured her. "But things are, likely to change around here. I want you to hear it from me and your mom directly. Or at least from me first. Mom too? Are you and Mom okay?" She was too sharp. Her eyes searched mine, and I saw a flash of intuition there. Perhaps she'd sensed our tensions or heard something. I just squeezed her hand. "We'll talk in a bit, I promise." Jake got home soon after, and we had a quiet dinner. Just the three of us since Vanessa had not returned yet. That in itself was unusual. She rarely missed a family meal if the kids were home. I had told her earlier that Emily was coming, and she said she'd be back by 6. But as we ate at 6:30, she was nowhere to be seen, and her phone went to voicemail when Emily tried calling to ask if she was joining. I just shook my head and said Mom must be tied up with her charity folks. Internally, I seethed. She was likely with Derek even now, with her children home expecting her. It only reinforced my resolve. After dinner, I steeled myself and invited the kids to sit in the living room. They settled on the couch, both looking anxious. I stood before them, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. This was the hardest part, hurting them. I want you both to know how much I love you, I began softly. What I'm about to say is not easy. But you deserve the truth. Your mother and I, we're going to be separating. Emily gasped, eyes welling immediately. Jake just blinked in shock. What? Why? He managed. I took a breath. Because your mom has been seeing someone else, and I've decided I can't continue our marriage in that situation. My son's face went red with anger. Mom did what? Are you sure? He looked like he wanted to deny it, but my grim expression must have convinced him. Emily burst into tears. Oh my God, I knew something was off. Oh, Dad. She got up and threw her arms around me, sobbing. I held her tightly, feeling my own eyes sting. Jake stood up, pacing, fists clenching. Who is it? How did you find out? Does Mom know you know? I motioned for him to lower his voice a bit and guided them to continue talking quietly. I explained the broad strokes. I had reason to suspect I got proof. I spared them the details and definitely the photos. And that I had already spoken to a lawyer. That last part seemed to really drive it home that this was real. They reacted with a mix of sorrow and fury. Jake was openly angry at his mother, railing that he'd noticed she was often absent but never imagined this. Emily was heartbroken, whispering, How could she do this to us? To you? I kept my own anger measured, telling them that however betrayed I felt, I would always respect that she was their mother, and I didn't want them to feel they had to choose sides in loving us. But she's the one who broke us apart, Jake said bitterly. That's on her. I didn't disagree. Yes, it is, and she will have to face the consequences of that. But for you two, I want you to know both your parents love you dearly. Nothing about that will change. Dad, what do you need from us? Emily asked earnestly, wiping her eyes. We're with you, whatever happens. I smiled at them, pride and pain swelling together. Your support, your understanding. This is going to become public in a way that might be uncomfortable. I am going to respond to what she did in court. It might make the news. They looked worried, so I explained the lawsuits against Derek in simpler terms. That in our state, you can sue the affair partner. Jake actually laughed harshly at that. Good. That guy deserves it, whoever he is. I had debated whether to mention Derek's identity to them. I decided it was best they hear it from me rather than maybe guess or hear it elsewhere later. When I told them it was Derek Wolf, Emily's jaw dropped. She remembered him from some company events and from our dinner with him months back. Jake cursed under his breath. He knew him less, but recognized the name. Man, that slimeball was in our house, Jake said, disgust in his tone. And Mom, wow, just wow. He shook his head, struggling to process his mother's actions versus the woman he thought he knew. I felt for him, for both of them, so profoundly. It's one thing to be betrayed as a spouse, another as a child, by a parent's actions. I'm sorry to lay all this on you, I said quietly. I didn't want you blindsided, and I could use your help staying civil when we finally confront Mom. They each promised they wouldn't explode on her, though Jake muttered that he'd like to punch Derek's teeth in. I advised them to let me lead when talking to her, and that it might be best if they weren't around when I served the papers. They agreed. Neither felt like seeing her immediately anyway. Emily looked downright sick at the thought. By 8 p.m., still no sign of Vanessa. I called her cell myself, and it too went to voicemail. That was highly unusual. I began to worry that maybe something happened, or maybe she was avoiding coming home because she was considering leaving me and was scared after our romantic night. But she wouldn't leave the kids hanging, unless Derek convinced her to come away for the weekend spontaneously. I tried a family GPS app we'd installed long ago when the kids started driving. Sometimes it still captured her phone location. It showed her phone pinging near Lake Jordan, a lakeside park outside the city. Interesting. Perhaps they had gone somewhere scenic. Or maybe the app was glitchy on location. Regardless, she was incommunicado. So it ended up that I had the talk with the kids without her even showing up that night. Part of me was angry. She'd increased their hurt by not being there when expected. Part of me was relieved. It spared a shouting match in front of them prematurely. We ended the night with me insisting both kids stay at home for a few days if they could. Emily arranged remote classes for Monday and Tuesday, wanting to support me, and frankly, to see her mom's confrontation. Jake, still in school, said he could skip a day or two given the circumstances. He was a good student. He'd catch up. I slept little that night, knowing the next morning would be decisive. It felt surreal, lying in bed alone, Vanessa's side empty, thinking that by this time tomorrow, my marriage would officially be over and a war would be underway. I wondered briefly where she was sleeping that night. Did she dare stay with Derek when she'd known Emily was coming home? The audacity, but so far her choices had defied decency, so maybe. Monday dawned gray and drizzly. Fitting. I was up at 6 making coffee when I heard the garage door. My heart pounded. Vanessa's car pulled in. She was just getting home. Emily and Jake, who were both awake and tense, peeked out of the kitchen as I went to meet their mother in the mudroom. Vanessa looked disheveled and tired, as if she'd been up all night. Her eyes widened seeing me standing there, arms crossed. "Grant, you're up early," she said cautiously. I went to an overnight planning thing and my phone died. I'm sorry I didn't call." I held up a hand. "Save it. We need to talk, Vanessa, now." My voice was like ice. She blinked, clearly startled by my tone. "Oh, okay, but can I shower first?" No." I took a deep breath, steadying myself on the precipice. This was it. No more stalling, no more lies. I know where you really were. I know everything, Vanessa. Her face went slack. What do you mean?" But her voice quavered. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear, though I knew the kids were likely eavesdropping just around the corner. "I know about you and Derek. The affair, the hotel in Greensboro, the secret meetings. I know, Vanessa." She went pale as ashes. Her purse slipped from her hand to the floor. "Grant, I can explain," she began, tears springing into her eyes. I felt an explosive anger rising, but I contained it to a low, furious whisper. "Explain? There's nothing to explain. I gave you everything, and you threw it away for him. Did you think I would never find out? That I'm some clueless fool you could deceive forever?" She shook her head desperately, reaching for my arm. I pulled back. "Please, let's not do this here. Where then? Some neutral ground where your lover can join?" I snapped, raising my volume slightly despite myself. She flinched as if slapped. "Mom?" It was Emily, stepping into view now, tears on her face. "It's true. You actually did this?" Vanessa looked like she'd been punched in the gut seeing our daughter's devastated expression. "Emily. Oh God." She took a step towards her, but Emily moved behind me, glaring at her mother through hurt eyes. Jake came up too, arms crossed and jaw set. "We know, Mom. All of it." How could you? How could you?" Vanessa broke down then, sobbing. "I'm so sorry. I never meant... It just happened. I..." She reached toward them, but neither moved to hug her. They just watched her cry, their own pain evident. It was a heartbreaking tableau, but I steeled myself. "Enough," I said coldly. "We'll have plenty of time to discuss the fallout of your choices. But right now, I have something for you." I pulled the thick envelope, the divorce papers, from a nearby table where I'd placed it earlier. She eyed it through bleary eyes. "Grant, please, let's talk this through. We are talking. This is me talking." I thrust the envelope forward. "This is a divorce complaint citing your adultery. And these..." I pulled out a second set of papers. "Are lawsuits against Mr. Wolf for what he's done. You might want to get a lawyer because trust me, I have." She stared at the documents as if they were snakes poised to strike. Her hands shook as she gingerly took them from me. "Divorce? Lawsuits? Grant, no, please. You did this, Vanessa," I said, voice rising. "You destroyed our marriage when you snuck around with that man. Did you think there'd be no consequences? That we'd just amicably part and you'd waltz into the sunset with him and half of everything I've earned?" "Not a chance." Her expression shifted from pleading to something harder. "I never wanted half of anything. I was confused. You can explain it to the judge," I cut her off. "Because I'm done listening to lies. Our children know the truth now, thanks to you. Look at them." I pointed to Emily and Jake, both crying quietly. One in anger, one in sorrow. "Look what your choices have done." She finally turned fully to see them. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, stepping towards them. "I love you both. Don't." Emily said, trembling. Just don't. I can't hear this right now. Jake put an arm around his sister and glared at our mother. You really shattered everything. Is he worth it, Mom? Is that asshole worth what you've done to Dad? To us? Vanessa shook her head frantically. No. I mean, it wasn't about choosing him over you all. I... I was unhappy. I made a terrible mistake. A 2-year-long mistake, apparently, I interjected. Multiple hotels and a secrets kind of mistake. Stop diminishing it. She shot me a wounded look. Grant, I know you're furious. You have every right, but these lawsuits... This will ruin us financially, ruin our reputations. Can't we? Ruin you financially, you mean? I said with a bitter laugh. I'll be fine. And as for reputation, you should have thought of that while sneaking into hotels. I have no sympathy for embarrassment you brought on yourself. She wiped her face, and I saw a flicker of anger in her now, perhaps at my intransigence. Do you really want to drag our family through court and media? What about the kids? I gestured to them. They're grown enough to know actions have consequences. They stand with me on this, don't you two? I looked to them. Both nodded. Vanessa looked stricken to see even her kids essentially sanctioning my retribution. At that moment, as if on cue, the doorbell rang. I knew it was the process server for Derek's summons. I'd arranged for it to be delivered to our house, thinking he might be cocky enough to be with her. If he wasn't, I planned to have it delivered to his office later, but I had a hunch he might appear this morning after not hearing from her. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there stood a courier with an envelope. Through the window, I spied Derek in his car at the curb, watching. The nerve of him coming here. I accepted the envelope. Is Derek expecting a reply? I asked the courier. He just shrugged and left. I stepped out onto the porch and met Derek's eyes across the distance. It was too far to speak normally over the rain, but I held up the envelope and then pointed at him, then made a sweeping motion with my hand like dust scattering. The message, "You're done." He looked uncertain, but I saw him pick up his phone, likely calling or texting Vanessa. Good. He was about to get a nasty surprise when he opened that envelope containing the lawsuits, but I wanted him unsettled already. I went back inside. Vanessa was frantically checking her buzzing phone. Presumably Derek was contacting her. She answered softly, walking a few steps away. Derek, No, he knows. He's filed. What? Papers just now? Yes, a courier. She looked at me with panic and some anger. They're suing you, oh God. I snatched the phone from her hand. Wolf, I said sharply into it. There was silence, then his voice, attempting bravado. Grant, listen, No, you listen, I growled. By now you have legal papers detailing exactly how I plan to take you apart. And that's just the beginning. You have no idea who you messed with. He started to respond, but I steamrolled him. You are going to lose your contracts, your money, possibly your career, when I'm through making your name mud. You should have thought twice before sleeping with another man's wife in a state where that's a punishable offense, you son of a bitch. I heard him stammer. This doesn't have to... We could settle... I laughed coldly. See you in court. And trust me, I'll enjoy every minute of it. I hung up on him mid-protest and tossed the phone back to Vanessa. She was shaking her head, tears renewed. This is going to destroy everything, Grant. Why couldn't we just divorce quietly? We could co-parent, remain civil, my eyes flashed. Quietly? After what you did? You dared to come into my house and suggest terms. No, you lost that privilege when you gave yourself to another man behind my back. Now we do it on my terms. And my terms are that you end up with nothing from me and he ends up broken. Emily stepped forward, voice soft but firm. Mom, you hurt us. You really did. I love you, but I'm just so disappointed. She started crying again, and this time Vanessa went to hug her and Emily let her, both sobbing. Jake joined, tears in his eyes though he tried to hide them. I stood aside, arms folded, letting them have that moment. My heart ached seeing my family in ruins, but it had to be. There was no going back now. Perhaps a gentler man would have looked at all those tears and relented a bit. But I remembered my own tears in that car weeks ago, remembered the image of them kissing, and I remained as hard as iron inside. After a few minutes, I cleared my throat. Vanessa, you should pack a bag and go to your sister's or somewhere for now. The atmosphere here is not good for anyone. She looked at me, eyes pleading. You're kicking me out of our home? I met her gaze without flinching. It's my home. You forfeited your claim to it. Legally, I can't bar you yet, but unless you want constant war under this roof, you'd be wise to leave for a while. Give everyone space. Jake muttered, I don't want to live with you right now, Mom. Maybe in time, I don't know. That clearly broke her heart further, but she nodded jerkily. I'll go. I can stay at Julie's. Her sister. She turned to the kids, reaching as if to touch them, but then withdrew, just saying, I'm so sorry. I love you both so much. Emily turned away, unable to reply. Jake gave a stiff nod but wouldn't meet her eyes. Vanessa took that as her goodbye. She went upstairs for a short while and came down with a suitcase and a duffel, face drawn and pale. I stood by as she walked to the door. She paused in front of me, as if wanting to say something more. In a halting voice, she managed, I know you'll never forgive me. I hope someday you'll be happy again, Grant. I felt a surge of conflicting feelings. For 2 decades, this woman had been my partner, and now she was a stranger. I gave a slight nod, not trusting myself to speak kindly. Happy? Perhaps eventually, but right now I was consumed with something else entirely. She left, the door closing quietly behind her. Through the window, I watched her hurry to her car in the drizzle and drive off, her figure blurred by tears on the glass. Whether it was rain or my own unshed tears, I wasn't sure. I sighed deeply, the weight of finality settling on me. It was done. The confrontation, the reveal to the kids, the first strike against Derek, all done. There would be many battles ahead, legal maneuvering, negotiations, public fallout. But the worst personal moment was over. Emily and Jake approached, and both embraced me. I held on to them like anchors. We'll get through this, I murmured. I promise. We will, Dad, Emily agreed. We're here for you. And I realized in truth I wasn't alone. My children stood with me, and that gave me strength to face whatever came next. Fallout and Phoenix Rising. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal drama, financial chess moves, and emotional aftershocks. As I had anticipated, news of my lawsuits against Derek hit the local business community quickly. You can't quietly sue someone for alienation of affection when you're both somewhat prominent. Within a week, a local news station even ran a segment. Tobacco tycoon sues wife's lover for millions. It had the sensational elements media loves. I chose not to comment publicly, letting my court filings speak. Derek, on the other hand, attempted some damage control via a statement that many allegations are false, and he hoped for a respectful resolution. It only made him look worse, a man trying to squirm out of a mess of his own making. Privately, Derek's lawyer reached out to mine, practically begging to discuss settlement. I refused any quick settlement. I wanted this to drag him through mud and cost him dearly one way or another. Margaret, my attorney, was gleeful with how straightforward the evidence made it. He doesn't have a leg to stand on, she said. He'll be writing you a hefty check or facing a jury that will despise him. Meanwhile, the divorce case itself was also in motion. Interestingly, after the initial shock, Vanessa's stance shifted to one of weary acceptance. Perhaps talking with her lawyer and knowing the evidence made her realize fighting would only prolong pain and likely not end in her favor. Through attorneys, she indicated willingness to settle the divorce fairly quietly if I dropped the more vengeful tort claims. That was a non-starter for me at first. I wanted to see Derek sweat. But Margaret advised that we could use the claims as leverage. Get what you want in the divorce. Full custody terms for Jake until he's 18, no alimony, and maybe a favorable property split. In exchange for maybe dropping the suit against her lover or settling it for a token amount from him, she suggested. Unless you truly want to go all the way in court for the principal. It was tempting to scorch the earth entirely, but I also saw merit in a swifter end for my kids' sake. Dragging a prolonged public battle could impede healing, so I eventually agreed to a mediation. The result? Vanessa signed a divorce agreement, conceding virtually everything. She waived alimony, agreed I'd keep the house and business and the majority of assets, and would only receive a modest portion of our savings, far less than half. In return, I agreed to formally drop the lawsuit against Derek after he paid a settlement. He ended up coughing up a significant sum, mid-six figures, to avoid trial, essentially punitive damages, albeit settled privately. I donated a chunk of that to a charitable trust, in part for PR, in part because I didn't need it. It was the act of making him pay that satisfied me more. I did require one unusual clause, a written apology letter from both of them. It wasn't legally necessary, but I wanted it. I think some part of me wanted their admissions on record, something I could look at if I ever doubted my decisions. They complied. Vanessa's letter was heartfelt, apologizing to me and the kids for her selfish and destructive actions, and not asking forgiveness but hoping one day for understanding. Derek's was shorter, full of regret and acknowledgement that he disrespected me and harmed my family. I showed neither letter to anyone. They were for my eyes only, and I tucked them away in a safe. Perhaps one day I'd burn them as a final catharsis. I hadn't decided. In the midst of all this legal wrangling, there were many hard days emotionally. Seeing Vanessa only in mediation sessions or brief exchanges to arrange her time with Jake, who mostly avoided her at first, was painful. 20 years of marriage doesn't vanish without leaving a raw wound. I went through a roller coaster, nights of anger, nights of sadness where I'd stare at old photo albums wondering how that loving woman turned into someone who could betray us. The kids were my rock. They each processed it differently. Jake outwardly angry for a while, though I got him into therapy to channel it constructively. Emily more quietly hurt and occasionally meeting her mom for lunch to talk through tears. I encouraged them to maintain a relationship with her if they could. She was still their mother. By a month post-reveal, both were speaking to her calmly, though with guarded hearts. For me, I didn't speak to Vanessa outside of necessary matters for several months. We coordinated through attorneys and brief emails. I informed her when the divorce was final. She already knew, of course, having signed. She sent me a message on that day. I know this is what you wanted. I just want to say again how truly sorry I am for everything. I will feel that regret the rest of my life. Thank you for being a good father to our children and for the years we did have. V. I had no reply. What was there to say? I simply forwarded it to a folder and moved on. Derek, for his part, was effectively ruined socially. Word got around about the settlement, and many quietly cut ties with him. I, in contrast, found an outpouring of support from friends, colleagues, even acquaintances who reached out to sympathize or share their own stories. I hadn't expected that. In some ways, I became a bit of a local cause célèbre, the man who fought back for his honor. It was ego-stroking, but it also helped me feel less like a victim and more like a victor of sorts. However, revenge has its costs too. There were moments I wondered if I went too far, especially when I learned that Derek's company, already losing my account, had lost others due to his tarnished name and was on the verge of bankruptcy. Part of me cheered. Another part thought of his employees who had nothing to do with this, now out of jobs. Collateral damage, I suppose. Wolf Media did shutter eventually. Derek reportedly moved out of state to start fresh. Good riddance. As for Vanessa, she kept a low profile. She moved in with her sister for a time and then rented a small townhouse across town. She got a job, ironically, running a charity foundation's office. Her years of volunteer networking paid off. It was humble compared to the life she had with me, but she was making do. The kids visited her there occasionally. They said she tried to decorate it homey, but it felt sad to them. I didn't ask much. It wasn't my concern beyond how it affected them. The surprising thing was, Derek and Vanessa did not stay together. Perhaps under pressure or guilt, or seeing what their affair had wrought, they broke it off almost immediately after everything came out. Vanessa confided to Emily that she ended it and was focusing on finding herself and trying to earn forgiveness. I suspect Derek, coward that he is, also lost interest when real-life consequences hit. In any case, there was no storybook romance for them. Their illicit fling withered in the light of day. I'd be lying if I said I took no satisfaction from that. It validated the notion that it was never truly about love, but about selfish desires and fantasy. When reality struck, they had nothing solid to hold on to between them. My divorce was finalized roughly 6 months after D-Day, D for discovery. The house remained mine, though I quietly put it on the market soon after. It was too large and too full of memories for just Jake and me, and he'd be off to college in a year. Emily had her own place at school. I decided a new start in a new home would be best. During those months, I focused on my company and on self-improvement. I hit the gym more, worked on some neglected hobbies. I started riding my motorcycle again, something I had given up because Vanessa disliked it. Reclaiming that passion felt liberating. I also underwent my own therapy to deal with the emotional trauma. It helped. I gradually found the intense anger cooling to a calmer resolve and the deep hurt slowly scabbing over. One day, on a whim, I visited the Tobacco Farm Life Museum out in Kenley. It's a place preserving the heritage of folks like my family, and walking those old farm grounds, I reflected on legacy and forgiveness. Not necessarily forgiving Vanessa, I wasn't there yet, perhaps never would be fully, but forgiving myself for not seeing the signs, forgiving the universe for the random pain. Acceptance more than forgiveness. By the 1 year mark from the affair revelation, I felt like a different man. Not broken, not bitter. Surprisingly, I felt renewed. Like I had walked through fire and emerged forged into something stronger. The final scene that truly marked the closing of that chapter came on a summer day, about a year after the divorce. We held a small gathering, yes, you could call it a celebration, at my new home, a modern condo downtown with a great view. With a handful of close friends and family. Ostensibly, it was a housewarming, but everyone knew it was also to toast the end of a bad era and the start of a new one. Even my parents, who had been devastated by what happened, flew in and stood by me proudly. At one point during the party, I stepped out onto my balcony overlooking the city skyline, needing a quiet moment. To my surprise, I found Laura out there gazing at the view with a soft smile. She'd been instrumental all year, both as CFO and as a supportive friend. We hadn't talked much about personal feelings. It was mostly business and friendly check-ins. But that evening, perhaps due to the wine and festivity, I saw her in a different light. She looked beautiful, confident, and for the first time in a long time, as she turned to me, I felt a flutter of interest that I thought had died. "Some view," she remarked. "Yeah," I agreed, then added meaningfully as I looked at her. "Quite beautiful." Laura blushed slightly and gave a little laugh. "Grant Copeland, are you flirting with me?" "Finally?" I chuckled. "Maybe I am. I guess I'm out of practice. Bear with me." She stepped closer and touched my arm. "I've been bearing with you a long time. I'm not going anywhere." It wasn't a grand romantic moment, but it felt real and positive. I gently placed my hand over hers. "I know. Thank you for everything." She smiled. "You know I care about you. Always have, even when it was just friendship." I did know. In hindsight, maybe I always had an inkling that Laura harbored deeper feelings, but she respected my marriage. Now, circumstances were different. I wasn't sure where it would go, but as we stood there watching the sunset paint the sky orange, I felt hopeful. I leaned on the railing, Laura by my side, and exhaled a content breath. The city below bustled with life, and mine too was moving forward again. Inside, I could hear Jake laughing with a buddy and Emily teasing her grandfather. I realized our family, though changed, was intact, perhaps even more honest and resilient than before. The three of us had a bond forged in surviving this ordeal together. Vanessa wasn't present, of course. She was no longer a part of my daily life, but I heard from the kids that she was trying to better herself. She volunteered a lot and even went back to church. Good for her. I bore her no active ill will by then. I simply felt nothing much at all when I thought of her, a dull ache at most, like a faded scar that occasionally twinges in the cold. They say living well is the best revenge. As I stood on that balcony, about to start a new chapter, possibly with someone who had truly been loyal to me, I believed it. I had lived through the betrayal and come out on top, emotionally, financially, and with the love and respect of my children. Vanessa and Derek, on the other hand, had lost nearly everything that truly mattered. In the end, I won, and not by stooping to their level, but by rising above, using the law and my wits, keeping my integrity intact. I hadn't needed to lay a finger on anyone in violence, though the thought had crossed my mind in darker moments. Instead, I let consequences and karma do the work. It was a cold, professional execution of revenge, just as I'd planned. I felt Laura's hand slip into mine. I gave it a gentle squeeze as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon. In that glow, I could almost see the ashes of my old life drifting away on the breeze. From those ashes, I had built something new, something stronger, wiser. A small smile played on my lips. Yes, I thought, I am happy again. Maybe not the way I once envisioned, but in a way that was hard-earned and honest. Inside, someone put on a classic tune on the speakers. I recognized it. Frank Sinatra's That's Life. I chuckled at the aptness. Laura raised an eyebrow and I extended my hand. "Shall we rejoin the party, Ms. Flores?" I said in a playful, formal tone. She curtsied dramatically, playing along. "Lead the way, Mr. Copeland." We stepped back inside to the laughter and warmth of friends. As the balcony door closed behind me, I silently bid farewell to the darkness of the past. My story of revenge had reached its end, and a new story, one of renewal and hope, was beginning. The end.